Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. I'm your host, Drew. Super pumped to have you back here with us today. Today is a throwback episode. I wanted to bring back some of my favorite episodes from the previous iterations of the show. And I know we have a lot of new listeners from the past handful of months. So I wanted to bring an older episode back for you to check out. So this is an episode, one of my favorite episodes that I reference a lot with my friend Seth Goodwin, aka Velvet Year, on YouTube and the socials. Love Seth. Me and Seth talk pretty regularly now after this episode of us connecting and really hitting it off. But we talk a lot about social media strategy, how he uses content to drive his music production business. And yeah, we talk a lot about stuff. Some of it, is a little dated as far as the advice towards specific things, but I think our general advice in this is really solid and there's a lot of great takeaways. So I wanted to make sure that especially you new listeners who may not be going through the backlog of the entirety of the podcast, make sure that you guys have a chance to experience this episode and take a listen to it. So without further ado, let's get into it. This episode with Seth Goodwin. Today with us, we have Seth Goodwin from Washington State area. Also goes by Velvet Year on YouTube and Instagram and on the general socials. Seth, dude, we're so glad to have you today.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, dude. It's funny. I think you said it earlier. You've known of me and I've known of you just kind of through socials and stuff for a while. And, I've enjoyed watching, you do your thing and, me and you really got into, I feel like me and you really got into the vertical content game around the same time also.
Yeah.
Which probably has a lot to do with it. So you were just
honestly,
figuring
dude, I'm just going to be honest. The main reason that I discovered you is because I was homeschooled. And so, when
freaking go.
When you dropped the Veggie Tail rap,
let's freaking go, dude.
My sister-in-law sent that to me.
Let's freaking go, dude. It all comes back to the Veggie Tales, my boys. It all comes back.
Man, next time I meet somebody, the first thing I'm asking them is, did you go to public school? And if the answer is anything but yes, I'm just gonna be like, all right, never mind. I'm gonna start having all these Veggie Tales enthusiasts hit me up, and I'm just gonna be like, what is going on? I'm like, oh yeah, it's Drew again.
Yeah. A bunch of our Discord is a bunch of people from mine and the people that follow me and Shama. It's really funny. Josh gets to interact with them all the time, and they're also very homeschooled. I love you guys. You're very homeschooled.
It is a vibe. It is a vibe for sure.
The rumors are true.
Man, I love it. If you weren't just hanging in there just for Pork Chopette Day to come around, I don't know. That's it was fire though. The pork chopettes were great. You know what I'm talking about? That was the best day of the month. Whenever we had breaded pork chopettes, it was like if you had a frozen meal that was really awful schnitzel, and it was the best. They put this shitty gravy on it. Ooh,
let's go.
I would do anything for a pork chopette. I'm fiending for a breaded pork chopette right now.
Pork chopette does sound like a Seattle grunge band.
Yeah,
bro, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. So I think it's very interesting. I think you might be the first indie pop guy we've had on.
Yeah,
Seth.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I think so. Because everybody else that we've had on is either a mixer that does a bunch of different stuff, or if they're a producer, they do mainly hip hop or rock and metal stuff.
That's true. I know that Shane really was on recently, and I guess he does more of the alt rock stuff or just straight pop now.
He does more alt rock and hip hop and hip hop leaning rock stuff that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, dude, you're like the first dude that I would quantify as like the guy that does the nightly 1975 like kind of vibe, or like Band Camino kind of vibe. You know what I mean?
Nice. Okay, cool. That means it's working.
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah. No, it's working. It's working. That's how I picture you, which is, I mean, that's what your entire YouTube channel kind of is about, right?
Were you super active in make pop music?
For a long time I was.
Yeah, that's where I know you from. So I don't think I deleted you off Facebook.
No, see, that's the thing is like, I feel like whenever I'm like talking with people, there was like a group of like, I don't even know, like 50 people where it's like we were either in the make pop group or like at the time it was like the Six Figure Home Studio group or like some other like Facebook group where it was like, okay, well, if you join this one, you've got to join these other 5. And you just become like lightly acquainted with like a bunch of different people.
Yeah, it's the Facebook music industry, bro.
Oh my gosh, dude. Imagine if somebody made like a music business documentary 10 years ago and it's just about like the Facebook music groups.
Dude, so it's really funny.
It's honestly pretty not great.
I mean, sometimes it started out being great and it's kind of devolved into something terrible now. But the original version of that was, I don't know if you were ever familiar with like in the heavy music world, you know what I'm talking about? It's like where the dudes from Periphery and Tesseract and like all of those guys kind of came from. They came from a forum, an Andy Sneap forum.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Andy Sneap forums or like the 7-string forums or like, and then eventually I think, but I mean now it was like it's URM, but before that it was, I remember when it was the Joey Sturgis forum.
Yeah, and then before that was the Chango.
Yeah,
dude.
And so that all kind of shifted into like where we were at, which is like it all devolved into Facebook groups, and now it's all just kind of like exploded. I don't know. It's a little toxic sometimes.
It's a little toxic. It is kind of interesting though to see how many people in production have like gone from like the metal world into the pop world solely because those were like the 2 main resources online for like mixing or producing tips.
Yeah,
like I know so many people that were like in metal, like me included. I was in metal before I was in anything else. Yeah, and then eventually transitioned into pop stuff because it was like, if you can get metal stuff to sound somewhat decent, it's like it's all harsh guitars, harsh drums, overly compressed vocals, super slammed mixes.
Every frequency on the spectrum at one time.
It's just a piece of duct tape.
I can't do metal anymore because it's like metal is so hard to do right. And then so like whenever you start like mixing like pop music, like you're like, whoa, like I could just let this 808 be massive and like this vocal doesn't have to be super filtered or distorted or compressed. And then like you try to go back to it and I'm like, oh my God, like I just wasn't in it long enough for me to be able to like switch back. Like I have lots of friends who are like insane at pop now and then like they can just go back to that genre in like a second and just kill it.
I do a little bit of back and forth myself. I do some heavier deathcore stuff. That's mainly because I enjoy it a lot and I love it.
Exactly.
But I don't really advertise that I do a bunch of that. Anything I get from that world is very much just word of mouth stuff at this
Lee
point.
And I keep talking about how we need to just do like a little project for fun. Just make it like super heavy. Yeah. I could shout into a microphone again, do it. That'd be fun. Do it all that way. So yeah.
Well, you said you started as like in heavy music. Why don't we get like a little bit of background from you and like how you kind of got into music production in general, Seth?
So for me, it started like music production. So kind of a deeper backstory. So when I was younger, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and I had like some undiagnosed dyslexia stuff. And so when I was a kid, like communicating or like with Asperger's syndrome, like you struggle with like nonverbal communication, expressing emotions and stuff like that. And it was really hard for me to like connect with people. I didn't really have friends for a majority of like my early life. But when I got my first iPod, that was where I could be like, oh, like this is what emotions are. And like I remember to this day that I found U2's Joshua Tree completely independent of anybody else. Like I did not know anybody else knew of this band other than me. And
wow.
I listened to that album like in the dark when I was going to bed one night, and I was in Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For came on, and I was just like weeping. I'm just like, this is the most beautiful thing ever because it's happy and joyful, but it's sad and melancholy. And so that's what got me into love with music. And then from there, I was homeschooled. So I had just a bunch of time to do stuff aside from school. Because like for at least, I don't know if this is how people still do homeschooling, but the way I did it was like you had VHS tapes with all of your lessons on them, and you had a spreadsheet of what you had to get done by the end of the day. So if you wanted to, you could just wake up really early, get all your schoolwork done by like 12 or 1, and then you just had the rest of the day to do whatever you wanted. So I would do that, get all my schoolwork done, and then I would do an hour of just playing Foo Fighters on drums, an hour of just playing piano, an hour of playing guitar, and then like 30 minutes of bass because I didn't care about bass.
Nice. Very nice.
You just started teaching yourself. You started like fully teaching yourself? Or did you end up taking
some of them?
Stuff eventually?
So I started out with piano lessons because my parents wanted me to, and I taught myself a little bit of guitar, but with like pretty soon after that, I got lessons for most of them. So by I think the time I was like 15, I had like one lesson every week in all of those. And I think the reason I got into producing originally was because when you go into the learning the instrument world, there's like this, okay, well, the next level is you get more technically proficient. And I hit this ceiling where I'm like, I really don't care about getting better at technical proficiency.
Yeah.
I don't care about
you want to figure out what sounds good. And
yeah, well, I didn't even know that.
I
didn't even know that. I just knew that I'm like, okay, I'm a solid drummer. I can play the beats that I want to play. Man, I really don't care about watching this Dave Weckl video and trying to learn how to play in 16/8 time and do all this weird stuff. I just don't care about it. So what do I do? Yeah. And around that time, I discovered Reason, and I was like, oh, I could like record stuff and like layer stuff on top. I could record the bass and the guitar and the drum, and that essentially just became like my obsession for like forever. Like I up to that point, I was really obsessed with video games, but I don't think I've played video games really, really consistently in like 10 years because that's just been my video game ever since I discovered it.
Yeah. Bro, second Reason starter on the podcast.
Also, like the 4th drummer in a row.
Yeah, I know. What is this? What is this? What is this, man?
Maybe
Drew loves it whenever a Reason person comes in.
I do.
I love it when a drummer comes in here because I feel like drummers are the best producers.
Yeah, I think it's also like almost like what we were going to before with like the early forums and stuff like that, where it's like the only way to know how to get those like early sampled kits to sound good is if you were a drummer and you knew like, okay, when I play the hi-hat like this is what it sounds like. Yeah. And like for people who don't have that, it's like you get like the machine gun like hi-hats like and you're just like, okay, no, it's like side of the stick, tip, side of the stage and like how to actually get something that kind of sounds like that.
Yeah, and you know, like almost 20 years later, we still don't have a single good hi-hat library, you know.
I will say the best one that I found is That Sounds Elements. I use that one pretty religiously.
I didn't know that they have instruments. I have like all of their one shots.
Sorry, not an instrument. No, they're just like regular loops.
I use That Sound loops constantly because they're like, hey, here's this basic thing that everybody wants to use, and I'm like, thank you.
I have thought about just like convincing some of my friends with like really expensive hi-hats, like, hey, let me just sample your hi-hat in like a super like multi-layered like content.
Me and Josh were talking about that too, actually.
What's really funny is like we literally just had this conversation last week where I feel like there's this massive hole in the market where it's like you have like all of these like sample and loop companies who are like all royalty free, and it's all based around hip hop, and like you can't even use them because you're gonna get flagged anyway, even though they're royalty free. And I was like, where's all of like the utility stuff for people who don't do hip hop, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't people releasing like guitar progression like with different strumming patterns? Like, why aren't they doing
basic stuff?
Like basic stuff. There are like some really good like tambourine and shaker libraries out there, but like they're kind of hard to find. And I was like, we should really just like start a company where like we just compile all these things for like, you know, there's so many times where I'm like either at a studio or I just don't have it here, and then I'm like, man, I really wish I had a library of all just like this one basic thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that would be so sick. Yeah. And just to do like, I would love to just have a hi-hat library that actually sounds like someone playing hi-hats, because it just sucks. Sucks.
The best cymbals I've ever heard, and me and Josh had this conversation with Joe last week from Get Good Drums. He's their guy that produces all their content, clean cut guy. Fantastic dude. Is the Invasion library has like the best cymbals I've ever heard, but specifically for like rock and metal, not so much for like anything outside of that.
That's the thing that's like, it sucks because I went to music college, and one of the drummers that I played with, Pravi, he had some really nice, like, he turned me on to like the beauty of like really, really nice cymbals, because he had like some 16-inch Meinl Byzance sand hats, and it was literally like he could go and I could put my head next to it and it was like still smooth and it wasn't hard.
That's the really nice thing about the Byzance sand library. The problem with cymbals is, one, they somehow got more expensive. And then
they're so expensive.
Two, dude, I was looking it up because I was like, I would love to have a set of hi-hats just to use. And then I was like looking up my favorite hi-hats, which used to be like $450, and they're all like over $600 now. And I was like, what? Like, that is crazy for a set of cymbals. But like, you know, what are you going to do? But like, the weird part about it is that there are cymbals that sound extremely good and work very well for live shows. And then there's cymbals that sound and work really, really well for the studio. So most drummers don't want to invest in both.
Yeah.
Because cymbals are expensive. So it's like, you know, like sand hats are killer. But if you're doing anything other than like low-key music, like you could probably use them in obviously anything jazz. But then other than that, it's like funk. You could probably get away with gigging with them. But if you're playing like a rock show with sand hats, like, and you're playing like a small club where they aren't really miking up cymbals, it's like you're not going to be super pumped on, you know, how they're perceived, you know. And like, I don't know, it just really, really sucks. Like,
it's also the side of like a lot of touring guitarists I know, like they'll have their touring guitar and then they'll have their studio recording guitar. And it's like, it's really hard to do that with something like drums, where you're like, man, am I gonna like have to buy like this really nice kit that sounds really good, that's made of high quality stuff, and then like leave it at home so that I can go use a cheap kit on the road because I don't want to damage that one.
Yeah. Or have it stolen,
Yeah.
Like, it just sucks. I mean, the same thing with guitars, though. It's like, for a while, like, whenever I was doing metal, everybody was like, dude, how are you getting those guitar tones? I'm like, I use single coils. And they're like, oh, you can't use single coils. I'm like, no, you can. The reason why everybody uses humbuckers is because when you're playing live with a ton of high gain, you get feedback and all that. And so it's like, you have to use humbuckers or else it's just going to be squealing like crazy while you're on stage. It's like, in the studio, you can use single coils and it sounds killer.
No, legit. I have go ahead.
I was gonna say it's very funny because my band uses only single coils and have only been using single coils, and you can tell that I'm in a band called Harm, like a post-hardcore band, and it's like very Under Oathy meets Counterparts meets like old Loathe kind of. It's pretty cool, but like we do use a lot of baritones and low tune stuff for post-hardcore, which is like the weird part, and you have to use single coils for that because that's the sound. Like,
the sound, dude. I really want to get one of the.
Seth was saying something about guitars. Yeah.
No, because I bought this recently, which is the Bill Murray signature guitar pedal, and cool. This thing, it's like that whole band. If you ever want to check out like Bill Murray and who's Johnny Frank from Attack Attack, that whole sound of that band is like a really distorted, I almost want to say like Soldano through like strats. And it's very like when you're mixing stuff, normally when you're doing heavy music, the thing that you're fighting with is how like the low mid range of the guitars is like eating everything up. Or with humbuckers, you're struggling to get like any kind of high end out of them that isn't like harsh. So dark. And so when you use a single coil, you naturally get this really nice, clean high end, and you get a sort of low end roll off. And so you can just get that sounding pretty decent. It's pretty nice.
It is very nice. And like, that's the whole reason behind like metal guys, they'll buy humbuckers, but then they get these humbuckers that have a ton of high end to them, and then they're putting them through expensive pedals, which also add a ton of high end to them. And essentially what you're doing is you're trying to resculpt the sound to be more like a single coil. And it's like, why don't you just get a single coil? Like, it's so much cheaper and it's faster and it's way more fun. And I don't know. It's just super weird. I have a Tele Deluxe that I put Lindy Fralden Twang Masters in. And I was like scouring the earth for these during the pandemic because I didn't want to pay full price for them because I was like, I might hate them. And there was one dude on Reverb selling them for like $200 for the set. And so I finally got them. And they are humbuckers that look like wide ranges, but they're actually like single coils. And so the voicing on them is very similar to a Strat, but it's not quite a Strat. And so like it rips for literally anything. And I love that guitar. We use it all the time in the studio. It's currently not set up very well. I have struggled with the neck on that guitar since I bought it. And I finally was like, I'm going to redo the shim. And then the shim was too high. And then I took the shim out, and then now my saddles don't go high enough because it has a Hipshot bridge, and it's not the same as like the Tele saddles. I think are higher than Hipshot. So out of the box, like a Telecaster, like the bridge height is actually higher, and so because the saddles dip up. And hip shots don't do that. So I need to figure out the shim again. But I miss that guitar so much. It's been like 3 weeks of not using it. And I'm like, it's just not the same.
I feel you. So, Seth, going from, you said you went to school for music. So, like, let's jump from there. So, you started getting your interest a little bit, and you started getting Reason, kind of learning all that kind of stuff. And then you went to school. How is that for you? Going to school, because I went to school for music education, which was super helpful for me, being that like I do some education type content online now, so like I've learned a lot from that. But mainly I went for the music courses, and like in 2000 and what I'm gonna date myself here, 2010, there wasn't really a lot of colleges with like, especially in the South, like in South Carolina, there wasn't a whole lot of colleges with like music production degrees. It wasn't really a thing in smaller schools. So, yeah, how was that process for you going to school and learning on a collegiate level?
I mean, for me, well, I think first of all, the thing to note would be that I went to an unaccredited music ministry Bible college in Canada. So
nice. Which
it was
one?
like very much. I'm not sure if I want to say the name.
You can tell me later.
Yes, but essentially, I thought it was cool. But what I noticed when I went there was, I thought when I was going there, I was like, I was already producing music for a long time up to that point. Like by the time I'd gotten there, I'd already been producing for, I don't even know. However, I had already gone through like all of the ringers of like producing stuff on my own. And then I went to that college and thought, man, this will give me so many more tools. You know, I'll be able to do like all the stuff that I want to do. And instead it was like spending 3 hours a day learning how to arrange a horn section for like, if I was like transposing stuff for a local orchestra. And it was, I felt like I really hit like a ceiling pretty quickly. Not in terms of like, I wasn't learning anything. I was learning stuff.
It's just not what you wanted to learn.
Exactly. It was like stuff that, and this is another thing that I noticed about like music education. It tends to be either classical based or jazz based. And most of the time, the way that is set up, it's not really set up for people who make music. Yeah. Like the modern person who's making music, it's made for somebody who is studying those genres academically. Yeah. And it tends to not be as useful as people tend to say. Like since we spent several months just really nailing down our ability to write stuff on sheet music. And since I dropped out of that school, I've literally not touched it since.
I did a school, so my school was more jazz focused, which I will say what has been more helpful in a sense of when you make certain genres, it does help you with like R&B and like lo-fi. Certain kind of like genres that tend to lean towards like a lot of, or gospel that tend to lean towards a lot of like weirder chords or in more, out there chord structures or things like that. But in most palatable music, you're never going to touch that. You might touch a flat major 7 or like a sharp diminished 5. That's like the most you're going to ever touch. But for me, it was helpful in learning that kind of stuff. I dropped out after 2 years.
Same.
So yeah, heck yeah, dude, fellow dropout. Let's go. I dropped out after 2 years because I was like, I don't want to pay for all this. I don't want to be in debt for like $60,000 to $100,000 to do something I don't want to do. So yeah, I quit before I got too deep into my education courses. I got like all of my music theory and ear training and like learning a bunch of different instruments kind of down. And then when they started going to orchestration, I learned like my base level education courses and then dipped.
No, because it's definitely like, and the way that I view it now is for people who are like thinking about going towards stuff like that. It's like, okay, like if you are planning to work as a professional in the industry, like you have to view like learning and stuff like that in terms of like investment of time and resources. So like for me, the reason why I dropped out is like, okay, I could spend another year and this many thousands of dollars learning how to perfectly arrange a string section, or I could not do that, get a job and learn how all of the compressors in my DAW work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I kind of ran into that. I had, like, my parents had a little bit of money in like a college fund for me, and they were like, you have to use this money, because like it was one of those things where like I knew that I didn't want to go to Full Sail, because I like, that was like I feel like Full Sail used to be pretty okay, but then like by the time I was getting near graduating, like I heard nothing but like bad stories about it, and it was super expensive, and I was like, I don't think I want to do Full Sail. And
to be fair, Josh, I was hearing mixed stories in 2011, 2012 whenever I dropped out of college.
Yeah, so like I graduated high school in 2015, and so I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that, because it just doesn't seem very good. And then also everyone was like, well, like if you go there, like you're basically guaranteed to like work as an engineer at a studio. And I was like, I really don't want to do that. Yeah. And then
also, you're not guaranteed at all.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, you're really not. And so I'm glad I didn't do that, especially now, because like I think I only know one or two people who went to Full Sail and it like really worked out for them. And I don't think I really knew what I wanted to do with my life at that point. So I would have gotten nothing out of it, you know? And then the other option was to try to get into like a music program, like at MTSU. And didn't do that because it was way too expensive. And then, so I was like, well, if I have to spend this money, then like there's always like online courses. So I did like the Berkeley online stuff, and I ended up dropping out after not even a year, because it was like I got through like the Pro Tools classes and I was like, sick, this is cool. Like it was great. I learned Pro Tools, whatever.
Good thing to know.
Then I did one like mixing and mastering class, and it was all like pretty easy. It was stuff I knew, and I was like, that's kind of to be expected. Like this isn't really geared towards people who like are practicing this stuff. But then I got into advanced mixing and mastering class, and I was halfway through the course and they're still teaching us about volume automation. And that's whenever I had enough, because every time I logged in, I just felt like I was wasting my parents' money. And I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like it's freaking me out. And so I dropped out.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if you did go for like a music program that was more like technically like
going to an inclined. MTSU or going to like a Berkeley school of music with a music production degree or whatever.
Yeah. Like it's kind of still pointless. Like there aren't too many like big producers out there who like went to Berkeley for like music production. Like a lot of these people that graduate that excel really well, like they go to Berkeley for like an instrument.
Yeah.
You know?
Like
and they get
Kenny's
in as
probably
like a really good.
One of the best examples of that. He went to school for guitar or something. I think it was guitar performance, Kenny Beats. He went to.
But even then, we're looking at it's like, okay, well, is he really using that the way that they intended him to use it?
No, definitely not at all.
Because that's the other thing I've noticed is people who do have success stories who come out of places like those, if you look at their story closely,
they were going to do it anyway.
They were hustling before they went there to make stuff happen, and they kind of used it to their advantage after they left, but it wasn't
mainly
necessarily like at the same time, when you go to college to become a lawyer, that's not like how they want you to use the degree. That's like you teach law so that you can become a lawyer and use it in that way. It's not like, well, I went to lawyer school, and from that I was able to, become a marketer agency for a cow feed manufacturer, and now I'm on the top of the world with cow feed manufacturing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's not the degree or the college doing its job. That's you being resourceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. It's like, I think the best programs are like the super short ones that are like, okay, you're going to work in this studio and like learn how to use everything.
So that's what I was going to say.
That's the other thing is like the alternatives
right?
to college are so much less expensive and are so much more practical in terms of providing information. That I'm not like. I mean, you guys had John McLucas here, and he literally like launched like a free course where it's like you can just watch everything that he does for creating a song from scratch. And I'm just like, how knowing college courses, I'm just gonna say it, most college songwriting courses are not that good.
Oh yeah, well they're dated.
At the end of the day, like this is how it works. Okay, there are some fields where you get to a point where you're like, yo, like I'm good enough to become a professor. Like in science, that's a thing. Like professors are still scientists because they're all sponsored and they're still researching and they're still this and they're that and they're still peer reviewed. Like Andrew Huberman, you know, like he is a human biologist at Stanford and he is very well respected and like it's like the epitome of like university, you know, but in other things, it's very much like if you were good at this, you wouldn't be a professor. If you were successful in this, you wouldn't be a professor. And it's like,
to piggyback on that, Josh, that point, because you mentioned it. So what I did, Seth, and I think this is something that a lot of people should do. And we even talked about this on Shane's episode a little bit, where he was talking about like learning in a studio. There is something about getting your hands and being in the environment that like you cannot replicate. What I did is I did a 3-month program. It was just a program done by a studio. It's in Charlotte. Shout out GAT3. GAT3 is really great. They did a bunch of cool records. They have a couple Grammys under their belt for mixing some random R&B songs and mastering a DaBaby song, and like they've tracked like a bunch of early elevation songs and stuff like that if you're in the church world. So they offer a 3-month course where it's you learn the studio from the ground up and you learn their studio, which is a very large studio. It's a SSL 9000J console, which is a 72 channel, like massive board. You learn their patch bay and you learn how to work with all of their very nice equipment and very nice mics, which you can kind of learn what it does. Multiple things. One, it teaches you how to actually work in a physical space. It also teaches you etiquette, which is honestly huge. And it teaches you what kind of mics you like, what kind of compressors you like, what kind of pre's you like, because they let you kind of mix and match all of their stuff. And having hands-on on that is like, that's a dream for anybody, right? To work with a true vintage U87 and put it through different things, is really cool, and know what that actually sounds like. On top of that, you learn everything about MIDI and audio and, the whole gambit of that. A lot of stuff I already knew because at this point I had been producing for like a couple years part-time by the time I did this. The whole program is only like $3,000.
Yeah.
And
which
like
would be the equivalent of like what? Like one quarter?
Yes, like one class maybe for a year.
Oh, dude, even online classes, that's 2 classes.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's 3 months. Now you had to be there, but that's kind of the whole part of it, right? Is like being there physically, hands-on, touching stuff, messing with mics. You were in a very small class of like, I think my class was like 8 people, which is great because you can ask questions. You have different professors that, specialize in, one guy was a songwriter that does keyboard stuff and like synthesis. One guy, Glenn, the guy that owns the studio, is the guy that teaches like mixing and the studio etiquette side of things. There's another guy that does vocal tracking and mastering, and then Glenn's wife handles like scheduling and like all that kind of basic stuff, like how to run a studio if you wanted to learn how to do that. But it's also good for multiple angles in that as well. And you get a lab, which is a band comes in and you track them. You help them work on the song, you pre-produce the song with them, and you take them all the way to mastering stage over the course of your 3 months. And that, I learned more in that than I did in 2 years of college, 2.5 years of college in 3 months.
Yeah. And it's like, it's informed learning. Yeah. Like it's not somebody saying, here's Pro Tools, let's learn every single thing that Pro Tools can do. It's saying, hey, if you're working in a studio, here's the 10% of Pro Tools you're going to use every single day.
This episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast is sponsored by Bliss. Bliss is an audio development company who crafts intuitive digital audio effects and instruments. They've collaborated with artists like Jean-Michel Jarre and Jordan Rudess and have an incredible selection of over 26 different plugins for Mac, Windows, and iOS for all of my mobile producers out there. Whether you are looking for an inspiring synth like the Megalith synth, maybe some classic compressors, filters, or chorus plugins, or if you want to get out of the box with something a little more creative like the Phase Mutant, they have something for everyone. Right now, when you go to bliss.com, that's BLEASS.com, and use the code HOMESTUDIOHANGOUT, all caps, you get up to 20% off your order. Thank you to Bliss for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like music should be looked at more as a trade. And that's like the entire problem with going to school for music. You know?
Yeah, because there's literally a thing called trade schools, because most trade-based professions, like going the college route for them is not like the best thing. I will say, though, I am worried about like this next generation, because like what we were talking about before, a lot of those big studios are just kind of like shutting down now. Or like people starting today, like, okay, it's a pipe dream to have a big studio like maybe 40 years from now. And
dude, there's like this. Okay, so like Threads just dropped, and so I follow Taz Taylor on there, and like I'm not like deep into the beat making world, you know. But, like I'll see stuff that he talks about, or like people that are applying to him, and this and that, and it's like I can't imagine like working on music for like 12 hours a day every single day, and then just crossing my fingers in hopes that I get a placement for a loop, you know. And it's like, that is insane. And like now, like there's an entire generation of kids that look at that and they're like, that's the dream, man. I'm going to be a beat maker. And it's like, what? You know, like, I'm like, obviously like we need beat makers, you know, we need loop makers, but it's like, that is insane to me that there's like an entire generation of kids who think that like FL Studio and like making loops and then like emailing hundreds of people, like there were people talking about like exchanging email lists in hopes that, and then like spamming all these emails of people and like hoping that they would get back to them about like, oh, we like that loop.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't spam people like that. That's bad. You're annoying.
Also, crazy. Like when you enter into that gets into a different conversation, which is like the business model, where it's like when you are doing that, you are saying, I am a replaceable commodity.
Yes, 100%.
The only difference between me and the next guy is I'm going to send you more stuff in quantity, as opposed to like, you know, I'm not flexing or anything like that, but like I've done a pretty decent job at like trying to distinguish myself from that, to the point where now I have a client who's just like, hey, would we want to do a thing where you just write me a song and I'll just pay you your full project rate for that? And that's I'm not going to give up specific numbers, but it's multiple thousands of dollars.
Yeah, as it should be.
Yeah.
As for one track that for a beat maker, they're going to be trying to sell for $30 to multiple people. Yeah, and it's like you're commodifying yourself, and it makes me sad, because there's like the part of me that like in the future I like want to be like a Rick Rubin style person for artists, and it's like there's a whole generation of like young people in the hip hop world where a producer is somebody who makes beats, and the idea that a producer is supposed to be somebody who looks out for you and develops you is like a foreign concept to them.
So that is single-handedly the weirdest thing about moving to Atlanta. It's like I got here and I was like, well, we're like the biggest city in the world for hip hop right now. And I love working on hip hop. Like, let's see what I can do. And it's like almost every time I follow up on like some kind of a lead, it's always just like, no, man, like I really don't work with producers. I just send me beats and I'll take it to my engineer. And it's like, well, that's kind of like the entire opposite of the point.
Yeah.
You know? Because like also if you look at the best hip hop records, they're always in the room working with other producers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like working with a producer should be collaborative, you know?
Yeah.
We should be bouncing ideas off each other. We should be figuring it out as we go. And it's like, it's cool to get beats and like a lot of times use that as a starting point, but it's like the ceiling is very high as far as like beat making goes. Like if you want to like make a lot of money at it, like you have to be really good and you have to be really up there.
You have to be unique as well at this point.
And then in order to get to that point though, you have to weed through all of the people who are going to be like, yeah, just load that beat up. And then they have their producer like make something completely different, you know? And it's like, now you just inspired a whole song. Bro. You have no clue that you inspired a new song because you're just emailing tons of
straight
people.
up.
And now it's getting remade and your name isn't going to be on it.
Straight up. Know? This has happened multiple times. Even with Shama, we were talking about Shama earlier with like the VeggieTales thing and like the homeschool anthem beats and stuff. Like he has straight up sent me a link to BeatStars and be like, yo, this is sick, but it's not quite the vibe. Can you remake this and make it more of the vibe, more of your vibe? I was like, sure. And I've straight up just done that.
People do that to me all the time. They're like, yo, I love this beat. And I'll be like, okay, I kind of don't. And so then we'll sit there and write a song to it. And then whenever I send them the actual like production demo, like the beat is gone. There's nothing left, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like that just happens. Like, I don't want to be that guy that's just there to be like, hey, maybe you should write a song to this track. And then they don't use anything of it and my name isn't on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like.
And part of that is also like what I've been talking about with a lot of artists recently is like the way that things are like incentivized to be more of a content model, even inside of music. Like with Spotify, you are incentivized to have as many releases as possible. Yeah. So a song that you spent 20 minutes on where you downloaded a beat and you just recorded one take of a vocal over it has just as much potential to make money as a song where you hired a string orchestra for a day. And it's like those two are like, I don't think that one of them is better art necessarily one over the other, but it's but
the price disparity is crazy.
The price disparity is crazy. And so right now it is incentivized to make really fast, cheap music, which, you know, I love songs that are just like beats that somebody just raps over, and I think that's fine. But it's like right now, that's like kind of the only way you can like even hope to make 100%. It. Like if you're doing like the Russ, like put out one quality song a week for like an entire year, or either that, or you're just like, I'm gonna become like a lo-fi artist, and I'm just gonna put out like 2-minute lo-fi beats like every single day, and it's like. That's the stuff that like works, quote unquote. And so you need to decide how much of which is kind of something I had to do with like YouTube and TikTok recently, where it's like I had to decide how much do I care about actually playing to this algorithm versus doing it in a way where I can actually like be a happy person. And
I would love to dive into that more, especially because from you know, we talk, I mean, it's the music industry. We have to talk about TikTok and shorts and like YouTube in general, you know, kind of stuff. It's kind of, you know, a part of the industry, embedded in the industry at this point. You can't go one kind of can't exist without the other. I would love to hear how your process and your journey of YouTube and like the content journey for you. As a dude who kind of started at roughly at the same time as me, I want to say you probably started a little bit earlier than me, as far as the consistency factor. And I will say you've been way more consistent than I am because I don't have the patience. And I was also like, I was doing it to grow like my own brand, as you know, everybody should, I think. if that's, an avenue you want to go down. But I was also working. I was also working already full time in music, and my schedule was already slammed with productions beginning to end by the time I was like, I should add YouTube stuff to my plate.
It's very much like you have to, and I think I've gotten really good at just like optimizing it to be like, okay, it's like minimum amount of time.
So, and that's what I would love to hear from you. Like, I would love to learn like how your process works on all that later, maybe. But I would love to learn how you kind of went into the content space and like your thought process, and like you're trying to separate yourself and, getting into making YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it definitely started with TikTok. Like most people, I started probably about the same time that like COVID was happening, or even no, I think it was like maybe a little bit before that. Yeah. And I just started posting like mix tutorials and stuff like that, and I noticed like, oh, some people actually like these, and so I kept making them, and through that I would just kind of I didn't really have anything beyond just I wanted to make a TikTok. Like I've enjoyed guys like Andrew Huang for forever.
Same.
And so I just wanted to make like content like that.
The GOAT.
Yeah. And but then after a while, I realized like, oh, some people are asking in comments like, hey, can I hire you for stuff like that? And so that sort of developed like the idea of like content models as like actually like a lead generation, if we're getting business term wise. But what I noticed was that, and I went really hard on TikTok. Really hard on for a long time. I think I was doing one a day for almost a year. And they were like, not to stroke my ego, but they were high effort TikToks.
Yeah.
Where
they were really good. They were really good. I did one a day for 6 months, and mine were like middle to high effort. Sometimes some were more effort than others, obviously, for me. But I even noticed, even in a 6-month time period, like, bro, if you're just consistent with that stuff, you grow fast.
Yeah.
As long as what you're making is at least great or good.
Yeah. And so I did that for a long time, and it eventually got to the point where a lot of cool stuff happened because of it. Like I talked about recently, but like I did a random video of like the Slate ML2, like their small pencil condenser microphone. And they saw that because it did really well. That one just blew up randomly. And so they like messaged me and they're like, hey, would you want to do like some ad stuff with us? And so they've sent me their ML1, and we did a thing this last month recently for their for the Mic Month sale for that thing, which was like
Very cool.
Stuff that I never thought would ever happen.
Yeah.
And but what I did notice was that I'm trying to find the best way to describe it. There's a certain kind of person who will follow you on TikTok. And it's like you cannot escape that because of how TikTok works. So like the way that I describe it is like a YouTube viewer or YouTube subscriber. That is somebody who is subscribed. They are seeing your content that you are posting on YouTube, and they are like, I want to see more of this. And when they do that, they are almost like subscribing to like a Netflix show. It's like a form of entertainment for them because people use YouTube as entertainment. Long form stuff is there. So people will like sometimes not have a Netflix or a Hulu, and they'll just watch YouTube at the end of the day as like entertainment for fun. And the kind of person who subscribes to you on YouTube is really valuable because that's somebody who like wants to connect with you on that level. Whereas on TikTok, almost everybody is on the For You page. Like to the point where like if you're realize you're on the following page, you're like, oh wait, I shouldn't be on this. And then you scroll back over to the For You page. And the For You page is 100% algorithmically generated. So when somebody likes your stuff or follows you on TikTok, you're still like, that doesn't mean that they're going to see you necessarily. That just basically tells the algorithm, I want to see this person more often in my generated algorithm.
Yeah,
that's happened to me. There was this one dude, I forget his name.
That's the other thing right there that you just said, Josh.
Yeah,
you don't know who
I don't
people
even remember
are.
his name. I followed him. I loved his cooking videos, and he disappeared from my feed. And then one day, after like months, he popped up on my my For You page, and I was like, "Oh, thank God, he's back."
Yeah, because
then I realized he didn't go anywhere. I just haven't been seeing his videos.
It's literally because it's the algorithm based off of like regurgitating what you like and what you interact with. And I noticed that from a content maker standpoint, where I could, now I have 25,000 followers on TikTok. I can still post a video, and if I don't do it right, like if I don't post it at the right time, if I don't grab people in the first second in the right way, if I don't have it be an interesting topic, I can still get like 20 views. And it's literally like you're the person who's committing to following you on TikTok. It's like worth less than an Instagram follow. Because at least then on Instagram, your feed is primarily like, well, now it's ads, but it's primarily people that you have said I want to follow, and I will see more of this.
And it's
like
generally
if you make a new Instagram account and you're not following anybody, your feed is empty.
Yeah. I found him. His name is Sad Poppy, and he doesn't post that often. He posts like sometimes only twice a month, sometimes like 5 times a month, but it's like I think just because of that, like I don't get a lot of his content, even though almost all of my content on TikTok is cooking.
and think about that. His videos are really good. You like them. He's not able to put out more than like one every month, and because of that, he's not getting recommended.
Yeah,
that is ridiculous. How TikTok works. It is 100% based off of like consistency and stuff like that. And so eventually I just got to a point where I'm like, I will take the L in terms of growing algorithmically and just put stuff out consistently. So I think I'm doing like 3 a week now, which has been really easy because what I'll do is I'll make a YouTube video and then immediately after that I'll record those 3 TikToks really quickly and just edit them alongside my YouTube video and just schedule them all to auto post throughout the week. And I've done that for the past year, I want to say. And that's worked out really well for me because it almost is a way to like redirect to the YouTube stuff where I feel like YouTube is almost like more of like an email list.
I've noticed more people using that model. I quickly went to that model. Whenever I started posting YouTube videos, I quickly went to I'm just going to chop up my YouTube video and find the cool parts that I want to showcase and make those the showcaseable pieces or whatever. And then sometimes I'll do, phone camera stuff every now and again that's a little more topical or whatever. Or if I find somebody like in a comment, like I'll reply to it via a video. So it creates a TikTok. So, pushes the algorithm a little more. So the transition was you were doing the TikTok thing. It was doing really well. You transitioned over to the YouTube side of stuff. Was that a harder transition going from short form to long form content about audio?
I would say the big transition was just in terms of time commitment. So like with TikToks, I could make a bunch of TikToks really quickly. Like in an hour, if I set an hour aside, I could theoretically make like 6 TikToks or something like that. Whereas with YouTube, it's a big time commitment. So on every video I'm doing right now, I think it's about 4 to 5 hours per video. So right there, that's just a barrier of entry that not a lot of people are willing to jump over. Because my content on YouTube is like hyper focused on a specific genre, a specific style, and really, really trying to make that like entertaining for people who are not into producing or anything like that.
For sure.
And because I've focused on that, I actually noticed it was a lot easier to get people to jump on board with it. It was still really slow. That's another thing when you go from TikTok to YouTube is TikTok is very much based off of like the over instant gratification of like, you get a follower, you get a like, you get a, and it's like made to artificially, that's part of the algorithm, is like made to artificially give you those senses of dopamine, even though you've got 10,000 followers, it probably doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. Whereas, with YouTube, it's a lot slower, but when somebody does follow, when somebody does like, it means a lot more. So like, I have 25,000 TikTok followers, and I think I'm just now getting to like 5,000 YouTube subscribers.
Yeah.
I get 99% of my jobs from YouTube. I get almost barely from Instagram or TikTok.
That's but it's kind of, I mean, it's the whole, it's a business model, right? It's the top, it's top of funnel for the short form content, funnel them down to the long form content, and then eventually we'll say like, I don't know if you have your KPIs on that, but 1 to 5% probably end up funneling down to at least an inquiry about a job. Yeah.
That's normally how it works out.
That's how it works out for me too. So I'm glad to know that is the same for you.
How do you, okay, so I've tried the whole YouTube thing. The thing that I run into is all the things I want to talk about are things I can't talk about. You know what I mean? Because
what do you mean?
Like for an artist and like, it's not out. And so I can't just be like posting songs that aren't released yet, especially because a lot of my favorite stuff is vocal based. So like, do you ever feel like whenever you're like making these tracks specifically for YouTube that like you're like, it's not your best work?
No, I feel like I've leaned into my strength with it.
Okay. I just need to figure that out, because like every time I would sit down to like make a YouTube video, I'd be like, today we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then I would start working, and then halfway through, like, I'm just like, yeah, this is dog shit. And then I just stop doing everything because it's been like an hour and a half of me making
that still happens.
Awful stuff.
Yeah. I think the way I was able to avoid that is because my YouTube content is it's not me making something from scratch, like where people are walking with me while I'm making it. I make it on my own time. I do all the stuff that I want to do, and then I do a walkthrough of that. And
then you do a walkthrough.
Yeah. So and that has played a lot better because I'm doing like specific breakdowns of specific songs. So like this one specific 1975 song, I have listened to it. I've recreated all of those layers that I hear. Let me walk you through how I was able to recreate that. And a lot of people like that because it's like, when people are trying to look up stuff, like I'm doing one right now where it's like Harry Styles As It Was. And like that little synth at the beginning, like people will look up like how to get that synth sound. And so now my video is kind of like a glossary for how to get that sound.
You're aiming for highly searchable, informative content.
Exactly.
Like SEO based content. I'm also I did kind of the same thing with my first couple videos, which have helped. My biggest video was a video that I did on how to use Ableton for live backing tracks, because there's really not a lot of, I found out there's not a lot of videos on that. And I also kept answering the same questions for a bunch of different bands I was working with or artists I was working with. Like, I want to use backing tracks. How do I do that? Blah, 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 blah. Coming from a church background, that's like easy. Everyone knows how to do that in like larger church world. So for me, it was like, okay, here's how I just literally opened up a live set I built for a band and was like, here's how I did it. Here's how I did that. And then here's what I would recommend. And then I did a follow-up video of like a shorter video of like best practices. Here's some tips that you can do to like refine some stuff, or, like my big one was like having an oh crap button to like solo out the click and the cue and kill all your tracks just in case you get like majorly off or something like that.
I think the best use of people's time with YouTube, if you're like thinking about getting into it, is do that. It's just like take the questions that you are constantly getting all the time and just make it a video so that if somebody asks you, even just in casual DMs, you can be like, here's a video I made on that. And they feel a lot more taken care of than just like a copy and pasted answer or a very half thought out answer that you have to type out multiple times. But I think also another important side of it that I think was very crucial for me and my growth is all of my content is me doing what I do. Like, people can point at my video and say, I want him to do that for me. And I think that is where I think a lot of people in the audio world might, you know, it gets difficult because you need to balance it out a bit. But like, I know a couple of people right now where they're doing really well on, you know, TikTok, or they're doing really well on YouTube, and they are music producers and they are playing the algorithm game. The problem is they're not getting any people filling out their form because none of their content is them like showing people what they do. They're doing all of the stuff that triggers the algorithm. They're doing stuff that's searchable, but they're not, like, off the top of my head, I can't think of like, well, if somebody asked me, well, what does their production sound like? I'd be like, I don't know. I haven't heard any of their productions. Whereas like my content is nowhere near as like well performing as theirs. They're going to get way more subscribers than me by far.
Sure.
But every single video I'm doing is me showing people, hey, this is what I do. I'm essentially like those YouTube channels with like a power washer where they just set up a GoPro at the corner and they just show them power washing a driveway, and somebody can just point at that and be like, I want them to do that for me. And then there's a form in the bio.
There's a literal button. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a higher conversion rate from viewer to client rather than, you know, people not showing them what they do and, you know, trying to fumble into having people hit them up for stuff. I have a model that I'm going to attempt to do that is similar to this. So my model is I'm going to reverse my my funnel. So ideally for me, it would be it's a 4-part instead of a 3-part, right? So you have your short form content that wide breadth, funnel them down into the long form content that you edit. For me, the step in between hitting me up for something is ideally get them into a live stream. And I'm going to start recording live streams to flip into long form content that flips into short form content. So I'm going to be making something on live stream, probably from somebody that for a client or something, like making a beat, mixing a track, tuning some vocals, whatever. And if I find something cool in that moment, I'll switch to YouTube mode real quick and record that on live stream. And then I can edit that back into a long form content video that'll then trickle back up the ladder. But then ideally, quote unquote, they would then go to the final version, which is hitting me up to be a client. Because they can see one for one, this is something that he's doing for a client already.
Yeah. No, definitely.
I think that'll work.
Yeah, it's worth trying out. I did do that for a bit. The hard thing with that is that live streaming is really difficult. And
for sure.
It takes a lot of hours.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm not trying to put in a bunch of time either. I'm just trying to do it mainly for if people are there and they want to watch, that's cool. I got plenty of friends that put it on in the background. I've been doing some tests, and they put it on in the background while they write or edit, like videos and stuff. And yeah, they'll just have it on and listen, especially if I'm doing just like a lo-fi beat or something. But if I'm making something like hip hoppy, also it helps. The main thing is it's essentially me having my camera always on and being to at a moment's notice make a YouTube video just off the cuff when I'm just feeling it. Or if like, this is a cool trick, I'm gonna make a YouTube video about it right now because I'm already on stream, cameras on, recording in OBS, everything's going already. That's my in theory practice. I am excited to try and test that out.
Yeah, I will say that because I tried something very similar to that.
Yeah.
And you know, always try stuff out before taking anybody's advice. But what I found was I was able to make better videos with YouTube when I was just like, I'm just going to make this YouTube video.
Interesting.
But that was mainly because from like a time commitment standpoint, because I found that I would have to live stream. And then with that live stream, I would, it would take like 2 hours because you need to hit at least that 2-hour mark before you got to that point. And then you would have to edit it down into a YouTube video and then edit that down into shorts. Yeah. And what I found was that I was able to make YouTube videos that I found that I was happier with when I just made them YouTube videos. And then those performed well. But on top of that, from a time commitment, it was a way easier thing to say, let me take 30 minutes to record this YouTube video and do prep work a little bit before that than it was to say, like, let me see what I can try to talk about for a whole live stream. Because a live stream, if you want to keep people engaged the whole time, is really hard.
Oh, yeah. I'm not excited about that part. I'm gonna try to do both at the same time is my idea. I'm only gonna probably like live stream like once a week just to see how it goes, test the waters with it, and like do it pretty consistently, and then have another day where I'm like making more of a scripted normal YouTube video on a topic or whatever.
Nice.
But yeah, so what does crafting a YouTube video look like for you then? Because there's a lot that goes into that as far as, are you scripting a bunch? Are you bullet pointing a bunch? Are you like crafting a hook going into it? Are you doing obviously you're not Mr. Beasting it straight up with like the high cuts and like all that kind of stuff. Also, that stuff takes way too much time for my brain to have to worry about. But
it does. It literally adds like a couple of hours of editing per video.
Yeah. But what is your approach? I would love to hear what your approach is.
Yeah. So my approach with YouTube stuff is that like it's meant to serve my production business, not the other way around.
Yes.
And so I very much try to be as economical with my time with it. So right now in videos, I have a form in the description where people can just vote on like what song they want me to recreate. And, people can submit suggestions, but I try to filter it out. So it's like, okay, if one person wants me to do this Strokes song, I'm probably not going to do it just because it's not going to do that well from a video standpoint because nobody's looking for this.
Yeah.
Other than this one person. And I think that one person can look on Google and see what amps they used for that record. But when I feel like there's a substantial amount of interest in a song, I will make a video on it. So I'll sit down and do a listening session where I'll literally just do bullet points of like, what do I hear? I hear a bass. I hear guitar. I hear this guitar layer. I hear another guitar layer. And I'll just do bullet points like that a couple of times over, which normally doesn't take that long. And then I will be like, okay, how would I recreate this? If I just had to do off the cuff, like what sounds do I have? How would I reapproach this? And then sometimes in some videos, I'll like research to see if there's any details on like how they made sounds. But normally I don't focus too much on that because I don't think that like when people are like, how do I get this sound? They don't really care about getting it like the perfect, accurate way. They just like, what is the vibe or texture of this element? And how can I get that vibe and texture, which normally doesn't entail following the exact same steps that they followed to get that on the record. So I'll just set a timer, and in an hour, I will try to get the bare elements of that instrumental out. I'll normally do like a verse or a chorus. Or a pre-chorus and chorus. And I'll do that for an hour. I'll get most of the chunks there in that hour. Take a step away from it, go eat dinner, or normally it's like lunch. I've tried to get it all on Friday now, so I'll start the day out with that. And then I'll normally come back to it, tighten up anything that I think could be a little bit better. And then normally I have to do one more session where like I'm I'm basically just prepping it for a video where it's like, okay, delete unused tracks, color code everything so that it visually looks nice and organized. And then I'll literally just hit record and just start going through it bit by bit, describing each element in the most non-technical term I can. Like, how would I describe this to somebody who is not a producer? Which can get difficult when you're going through like, here's how oscillators work in a synth.
Yeah.
But I try to keep it. I try to keep it as the most accessible version of that
for sure
that I can. And then, normally the intro is just like, since I'm doing the same video over and over again, it's pretty much like a script that I've memorized. The way I have everything running is I'm using OBS, and I have my nice Sony camera and everything routed. I've spent a lot of time doing this, but I've set it up so that when I record in OBS, it is all one file. So I will perform those camera transitions in OBS. So I don't, if you see things going from like a wide shot to like my face on the side to with Ableton in a majority of it, that's actually how it looks the whole time. I'm just swapping scenes in OBS and then just cutting out that space after the fact. And when I am recording videos, it's all being recorded as one file. So there will be one file that is all of the video for that video. And then there's an audio track that is just my mic. And then there's a separate stereo audio track that is just my DAW. And that's all baked into one file. So I literally just drag and drop that into Premiere, and then I just cut it up. And then recently, I've found this plugin called Auto Cut, where you
that's crazy.
Drop it. You drop your video into it, and you can drop a video file that has multiple audio tracks, and it will just ripple delete anything where there's silence. And then you can export it as a Premiere timeline. And so I literally will just do that, because normally a raw video will be like 40 minutes long. I'll run it into there. It will bring it down to like 29 or 28 minutes. And then I'll just go through in Premiere and just ripple delete like flubbed takes or stuff like that. Yeah. And once I do that, like 90% of the video is done.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, for me, it always takes a lot longer.
Yeah, no, I can normally get a video edited in less than an hour because I've gotten it down to like a pretty regime, like with keyboard shortcuts and things like that.
For sure.
I did notice that with TikToks and vertical stuff, they performed a lot better when I like filmed them separately and made them like things I talk about in the video, but I just like I rephrase them specifically and refilm them for the TikTok format. So I'll just take like another 10 or 15 minutes and take like 3 bullet points. And again, since I'm doing the same content over and over again, one of them is always like how I recreated this song in 30 seconds. And then like 2 other like things I think are cool from a production standpoint. And exact same thing. I just have a separate OBS scene that's vertical, and I just swap between all of it. It's all on one video file that has multiple tracks, and so I just ripple delete the whole thing. And
are you using the vertical plugin?
I am not actually. I have a separate OBS. I do. I think that I feel like that's really useful for if you're live streaming and you're trying to capture stuff for vertical content while you are live streaming. I'm not really live streaming. I'm just using OBS to record stuff.
Yeah. I use it to record stuff because I can move things around and have like multiple scenes and not have to care about changing stuff around.
Yeah.
So anyway, Josh,
it's becoming like a recurring theme on the podcast about how I talk about how bad I am with everything that involves video
and technology.
I can't even get OBS to like do anything. I'll set like my sources and my inputs, and then it's just like here's a black screen, no audio. And I don't know. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong.
I mean, it's not an easy piece of software.
Yeah.
To be fair, like it's not like clunky. An easy piece. It's one of the things where if you are looking for a resource on stuff, I would check out EPOS Vox on YouTube. He's done a lot of really, really awesome stuff. He has a really great like beginner's setup for OBS. I will say I have recently been like, I want to upload, I want to do videos in 4K. So I just bought like a 3060 Titan for my computer just to handle that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for most people, being totally transparent, it's like I feel like with a lot of people, they can just set it up once, like watch some YouTube videos on like how to get it set up, do that, and then never think about it ever again. Like some of the top streamers in the world have no idea how their OBS setup works. They had somebody else set it up for them, and they just have like 2 scenes that they swap between.
All right, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to dive into this.
It's a world, dude. It's a whole world between.
It's the same thing with music production.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
between Epos Vox and Harris Heller, you'll learn a bunch just between. I think what is it? It's Senpai Gaming now, right? Because it was Alpha Gaming.
He changed it recently.
Yeah, so between Senpai Gaming. Harris is really, really knowledgeable. He's more on the live stream sector, but he's really knowledgeable when it comes to like cameras and like editing and like general OBS stuff. And then Epos Vox is like a little more of like a crunchy deep dive guy into nerdy like OBS stuff. They're both really knowledgeable.
Yeah, and I think that like, you know, on some level, like I'm not outing him for this. This is just like an example of how like most of the stuff does not matter. Like I was talking with John McLucas recently about like an OBS setup he was using to record stuff, and I was like, you know, if you just set up MKVs to automatically redux to MP4s, you know, you can be stable. He's like, wait, you can have it do that? And just like, go in this tab and they hit this setting and check this box, and he just went, because he didn't even know that was a thing. Not because John doesn't know what he's doing, but because it's just such a complicated piece of software, and 90% of the features are like, you will never use them. It's almost a Pro Tools for streaming. So just like watch a YouTube video of how to set it up in a very basic way, and then don't worry about it ever again.
And make sure you set your recordings to MP4s. Because the first time I did that, and it wasn't MP4s or dot moves.
Set it. I would recommend setting it to MKVs and then go into advanced and set it to auto remux to MP4s. Because if you are recording with an MKV, it will, and your stream or whatever crashes, it will save that MKV and you can turn it into an MP4. Really nice. But if it crashes and it's recording an MP4, you just lose the whole thing.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know that. Mine's doing the transfer. But yeah, make sure you do the transfer, because the first time I did it, and I was like, what the heck is an MKV file? How the world do I put this into? I was
also another thing, if you accidentally forget to set that up, you can also go into OBS in the top side, and there is a option to remux file. You can just open that and then drop an MKV in there and hit remux, and it will turn it into MP4 in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, I just used a converter, but
half of being a content creator now is like being a video editor and a content creator on top of the job that you already have.
Yeah, it really is. For better or for worse, I think in the long run, and maybe you could speak to this because you just got monetized on YouTube, right?
Yeah, literally like a couple of days ago.
Heck yeah, dude. That's awesome. That's so good for you.
That's very sick.
The 4,000 watch hours, that's the part that kills me, man.
No, legitimately getting 1,000 subscribers is like the easy part.
I'm almost at 500 and I've only been doing it for like maybe a year.
Yeah, and
not consistently.
It's like it took me like, I want to say like, I had a YouTube channel for a while, but it took like a decent amount of time to get to 1,000, and it was really cool when it happened. But dude, it took like, I got to 1,000 subscribers. It then took me like another year to get to 5,000 subscribers, and by that point I finally got 4,000 watch hours.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, if you are just doing it as like I want to make money from this, that is a terrible way to approach it, because there's so much more better uses of your time if you're trying to just make money. But at the same time, there's the slow growth benefits from that to where now literally I just moved from Bonnie Lake, Washington to Olympia, Washington, and all of the move was paid for by production clients, where 99% of them are coming from YouTube.
Yeah.
And now that you're creating regular YouTube videos, you have a big back catalog and you're monetized, you can build an extra little nest egg, however, minimal it might be, can go towards helping you do either, and I mean, ideally create better videos to end up growing the client base, or pay for an extra little like dinner or something. You know what I mean? Like,
It's especially since it's covering multiple of those areas for me right now. And it's made some really cool connections. So for example, there's a company there's a product that I'm going to be featuring on the channel in a bit that's currently under embargo, but it's like a company that I've really loved for a long time. And they were just like, hey, we're doing this thing that I'm not going to go into any details
obviously
about it right now, but it's like a really cool like software company that I've loved for a long time. And they're just like, hey, we're making this product. We love your videos. Would you want to do a video for us with our product in this style? And I'm just like 13 or 14-year-old me would be shitting himself right now. I'm sorry. Sure. I don't know if I can swear, but
yeah, you're fine. Yeah. Josh, we do it all the time.
Yeah.
But
no, that's really sick though. It creates, I think people underestimate the value of the beginning stages, right? Even if you aren't making money off of YouTube, that even before you get your first 1,000 subscribers, and Josh, if you don't know, you have to have 1,000 subscribers minimum and 4,000 watch hours in a year to be monetized, to apply for monetization on YouTube. So prior to meeting those standards, you don't get paid from YouTube at all. Okay. I think now they have some other weird like mid-level standards, but those are mostly for live streaming uses. But what most people get paid off of from YouTube is the ad revenue sources. Prior to that, you don't get paid anything. But what you can do prior to that is what both me and Seth have done, which is you build a client base off of that. You can build email lists off of that. You can still sell products, just not on YouTube.
Yeah. I wonder what my watch hours are, because I uploaded like an hour-long video that got 10,000 views.
That's also the other side of YouTube that you start getting into is like, okay, what is I spend a lot of time on
watch hours. Yeah.
Optimize watch time, but also with like thumbnails. Like you start getting a lot pickier with like, okay, in Photoshop, how do I make a thumbnail that is like, it looks good when it's like the size of a postage stamp? Mm-hmm. Or how do I use SEO for like a title that's going to do really well? And you can like look at like click through impressions or like watch hours to see like, okay, if people like, if my average video has a average watch time of like 5 minutes, and for this video, everybody's clicking off in like the first minute. It's like, okay, what did I do in the first minute? And then never do that ever again.
And most of the time it's talk too long.
Yes.
Most of the time it's you give way too much of a preamble before you got to the actual content of what they're there to watch.
99% of editing content is cutting stuff out.
Yeah.
There's almost never Finn McKenty had a quote. It's like, whenever I've uploaded a video, I have never regretted cutting something out. I have always regretted leaving something in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair,
dude. I had 462 watch hours from that one video. That's pretty cool.
That's actually really good for one video.
Yeah, most people zoned out pretty early within the first 35 seconds, but a lot of people skip through to the end. But I got a lot of good feedback. That was on that like Loath type video that I made like 3 years ago.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. The whole, to me, there's no reason for people not to try to do something with YouTube. If you're a growing music producer, like especially earlier on, like try it. Why not? Right.
Especially, honestly, I really like it, and I want to do it more. It's just I haven't really found a way that like makes sense, you know? Because like it took me so long. To
Seth could probably speak to that too.
No, I think the best way to do it is like what we talked about, where make videos that just answer questions that you're constantly getting, just because then making the video is like a good use of your time, but also just like have it be a thing where you ask a client when you're onboarding them, it's like, hey, I'm starting a YouTube channel. Would you be cool if when you are releasing this song, I do a video, like a little behind the scenes of how I produced it, and just have that upload around the time when it goes live? And people actually love that. They love having because it pushes their song more.
Yeah, it's really good for their SEO too.
Yeah, and you get the benefit of like, okay, here is because I know not a lot of people can do what I do, where I like have to like dedicate like a couple hours or 3 hours to make an instrumental. Whereas if you're already a working producer, you can just take something you've already made and sort of repurpose it for content. So I think that's a good route, or even just if you wanted to go like the Mr. Bill route, where you have this one technique that you're constantly doing over and over again, not necessarily like a full song breakdown, but like whenever I'm using this plugin, I'm always using it this way, and like I don't notice a lot of other people using it this way. So here, let me just really quickly open up OBS, record myself, and just talk about how I'm using it. Because yes, there is like you want to get over like the 10-minute mark. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, but at the same time, it's just like doing something is better than nothing. And most people who are like in their own heads about it, they're in their heads so deep that they're just not doing anything. So I think just doing something is just worthwhile trying out.
Agreed. Yeah. And there's only so many upsides. You learn if you're able to do it is a first kind of thing. Like you learn what it's like to make a video. Learning what it's like to make a video is kind of wild if you've never done it before. Learning how to speak on camera, learning like what editing looks like. It gives you a massive respect for people that do it at a super high level. Like looking at even people who do less hyper edited content. Like I watched this channel called Colin and Samir a lot, and they do less Mr. BC hyper edited type stuff, and more like they do deep dives on every episode is kind of like a deep dive on like a creator of some kind. So they'll do a deep dive on like Ludwig, or they did a couple with Jimmy, or they'll do they did recently one with Dream, who's like the Minecraft streamer, and they do like basically exposés on an individual creator, like how they got done and behind the scenes, and it's an interview style show with that creator, a lot less edited, but the edits they do are hyper like particular.
And you also, there's just so many other upsides. Like you learn to become a good presenter. You learn how important it is to like, because the first time you do a video, you're just like, oh gosh, I flub every other word. I do all this stuff wrong. And by the end of it, you have to cut it up. It's like, today we are going to talk about the 1975. And you like learn to be like, okay, I'm just going to stop and be like, today we're going to learn to talk about the 1975. And it's like, those skills are things you don't even realize you don't have until you have video evidence that you don't know how to do them.
For sure.
And, that in and of itself is like, okay, well, next time you get on a sales call and you're not just nervously talking in the middle of it, that could translate into you getting more clients. There's been several projects right now where people have, I've been on a sales call with somebody and I just jumped on a call with them and they're like, oh my gosh, I love all of your videos. I've watched every single one of them. I'm just ready to give you money. Let's just go. And I didn't even have to negotiate for a price. They literally were just like, I'm just ready to give you your full payment right now.
Okay, so what is like the percentage of people that you're working with that feel like you're leveling, like they're going to help you level up your career?
Level in terms of like getting notable credits and stuff like that, honestly, probably not a whole lot.
Yeah, but that's been my biggest issue with like because like I was on the content thing like a few years back and I was getting a lot of people just like straight up hiring me for like a pretty high rate, and like it was cool, but like I wasn't finding anybody that was like actually like dedicated to like being an artist. And so I kind of did like a full 180.
That becomes more of like a value thing of what do you value in terms of your career. Because for me, I'm like a person where I'm like, you know what? I really don't care about following credits and things like that. And like because of that, I'm able to do that. So an example of that, the other side of that would be like a John McLucas. So John is really working hard right now. And he has a lot of cool stuff happening where he is going for that route, and as a result he's not really doing as much on YouTube anymore. So
because like
it becomes focusing on like, what is my priority of where I want to be, how do I get there, and then from that I will look at the steps on what practically can help me get that direction.
For sure.
Yeah, because I feel like I have like a couple different ways that I'm trying to pivot at the same time right now. And so I've been thinking about like hopping back in on the content thing and finding more artists that are in that lane, and just to like kind of like get way more work out there, and then
it's a good way to do it.
Kind of take a step back and then push for whatever else.
Yeah, I think Josh, if you gotta go pee, you can go pee.
Oh, thank God, dude. Pee break.
Yeah. Josh has got to pee really bad. He's about to explode. Let's just talk about YouTube stuff real quick, because I am very intrigued about this for you. So YouTube for you, what do you find is the like if you had like an ideal version of what your YouTube channel would be? Is it doing what it's doing right now, just at a higher level? Or is it like, if you had to compare to another person that you watch regularly or something like that, what would you see that being for you?
I would probably honestly it would probably be a portion of what I am doing right now. So like the recreation stuff, just because I feel like that is a strength that I have, and that's a video type that people have very clearly responded positively to. I would like to almost do a Venus Theory thing at some point where you can.
I've never watched Venus Theory.
That dude's channel is really good. He does a lot of nerdy sound design stuff, but he makes like video game soundtracks and patches and things like that.
Okay.
But he also has these other sort of like video essay style stuff where he's just like,
I have seen one of his videos.
His Splice video is probably
the Splice video, and what was it? I think it was the "You Might Not Ever Make Great Music" video.
Yeah,
why you might not ever make great music.
The reason he is able to make those videos, which from an algorithm standpoint are probably like, he has 200,000 subscribers, so he's able to make it work. But like, those are not videos that like would do well. If you
they're not algorithmically like tuned videos.
No,
he hit on a conversation.
Exactly. But because he has a membership site where he is able to like serve a community that he has, and it's a paid membership site, he's able to almost use that as a way to be like, okay, I'm going to offset the fact that I'm going to take a bit of a hit on my channel from releasing a video that is not as algorithmically suited for it. So again, it's like, I don't care about growing on YouTube per se. I care about, because there's a lot of things that I would love to talk about. Like, and I guess you would also know this too, because you also did a video that was like your top 5 books that you would love for people to read. Those videos
as producers
do very poorly.
I know.
They're very, and on some level, I think that that's like the best information that you could give to people. But like that doesn't play well on the algorithm side. And so I would love to be able to have it set up where I can keep doing the types of videos that people like from me, but also be able to sprinkle in stuff like that where it's just stuff that I genuinely think is helpful for people.
Yeah. I have so I have like a vision of what I would ideally, an idealistic version of what I would love to do on YouTube, which does end up handing me more clients, but also make stuff that I enjoy. And like, I have a marriage between obviously Andrew Huang, who's like the GOAT at that stuff, but he does a bunch of different kinds of stuff, right? Some of it's informational, some of it's vlog based, some of it's just, here's this cool thing that I found and I'm going to put it out as a YouTube video. And he did a whole series on just like music theory, which was really cool. But also people like Ali Abdaal. I don't know if you've ever watched Ali Abdaal before. But he's like productivity, and like that's kind of where I got the idea for the book thing. And like, so I'm trying to marry those two worlds, which probably from like an idealistic, it's more idealistic than it is like an actual thing people would look for.
And that's the thing to balance out is like, is YouTube are you a producer who has a YouTube channel, or are you a YouTube channel centered around music production? Because those are going to change it. If you're a producer who happens to have a YouTube channel, all of your YouTube stuff is going to be pointing people towards your production business, and it's going to be lead generation and bringing stuff there. If you are a YouTube channel that happens to be centered around music production, you're going to be focusing on stuff that is just entertaining to watch, that's going to play better in the algorithm. You can be more of the creative side of a YouTuber, and it's less about like, can I get somebody to fill out my form? So you kind of have to pick what balance of that you want.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because like, I think in an idealistic world, like I said, I would be able to do, it's almost both, but it's not really both, right? It's more of like, eventually I would have to give up the making the content pointing people to me if I were to go that idealistic route, right? Because I would make content for just like the fun of it. And like making fun content rather than content that points people to wanting to work with me. And
I think they're both kind of the same thing, right? Like they can
not really.
They can be in the same realm, but I think it's more so like when you are making a video, like who are you? This is the way I view it: is who are you making it for?
Yes.
Like, what person are you like making this to help? Because with a lot of like the music production stuff that I'm doing right now, it's like, okay, the people who I'm making this for are people who are either artists who don't know how stuff works and they need somebody to explain it to them in a very simple way, or it's DIY producers who are looking for like a resource or something like that. And both of those help me get more production clients. Whereas when you're doing more of like the self-development stuff, like with books, it's like now you're making it for somebody who's like trying to work as a freelancer in the world that we're in.
Yeah.
You're trying to be almost like a business mentor, or even like, just, I hate the word guru, but like the traditional sense of like somebody who's like almost a spiritual guide,
a knowledge leader or whatever.
Yeah. And what I would say at some point is like, it's almost like the same thing with like TikTok and YouTube, where it's like, yeah, you can get a lot of followers on TikTok if you just play to the algorithm, or for me, I could just focus on YouTube and get the kind of focused audience that I know I want. People have the same thing happen on YouTube, where they will make a channel that does really well, but the kinds of followers that they have are not really the ones that are like going to be interested in the content that they want to make.
Sure.
And so eventually a swap over happens, where then you're just like, well, why are people unsubscribing? It's like, well,
yeah,
if I subscribe to a YouTube channel because they do cooking videos, and then at some point it just changes to be a travel vlog, like,
yeah,
I didn't follow them for a travel vlog, I followed them for a cooking show. So
yeah.
You do need to balance out like long term, like, what do I want to do with it now, but also like, do I actually want to do the kind of content that I'm doing right now long term? And for me, on some level, I enjoy just like talking about nerdy stuff with production. Sure. So what I'm doing right now, I don't see it being a drag in the future. Yeah. I just see maybe adding some other things on top of that. Whereas I feel like, if you are like, man, the Olive Doll stuff, like, if you know that the book videos are like what you want to do and that's what you want to be for people, and you don't really care about it as like a lead generation thing, then I would say probably like lean into that and go for it even harder.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, my ideal version of it is like, it's a place where people who are learning, and then there's a step like of like, if there's an inkling of I want to take it seriously, there's at least a little bit of content there for them as well. But it doesn't necessarily play to the same type of person. That's the problem. But yeah, I don't know. I would say, on top of talking about nerdy stuff, because we're coming up on, oh my gosh, almost 2 hours. I'm trying to like be wary of your time.
Are you good, dude?
I would really love to talk about some nerdy stuff. So what is a fun thing, production trick, mix trick, something like that, something super nerdy or what have you, that you have been stoked on, that you've done, or that you figured out recently?
I think probably the thing that I'm the most nerdy about right now is that there's a couple of things. So one is I've just got an IO set up right now to where in Ableton you can have this thing called an external audio device, and it's basically like you drop it in like it is a plugin, and then you can have it route to a physical output and then a physical input to like return. And I've been using that to run parts of my mixes through guitar pedals, and it has
really
been
cool.
So fun. So I actually bought like an MXR, or not the MXR, the Line 6 M5, which is like a stomp box modeler, which just has a bunch of reverbs, a bunch of like weird fuzz pedals and stuff like that. And you're just like, okay, well, all of the stuff that's like cheesy that all guitar players are like, I'm never going to use this sound. It sounds kind of cool when you throw it on a snare. It sounds kind of cool when you like do a vocal throw through a low bit depth delay pedal that is just crushing stuff. Yeah. So that's
a lot of the guys that I see that are into synths really like the Zoom pedals for some reason, and I've been thinking about picking one up because I just got a Micro Freak. Yeah, and so I've been playing around with that, and it's been so much fun making new sounds.
It's great because when you take something that is like the multi effects pedal world, it's like it's only been for like processing guitar DIs up to this point, and so now that you have like a lot of stuff like the Micro Freak or like accessible synths, now it's really easy to just route them in and mess stuff. Like a couple days ago, I was like, man, I wanted to make this hi-hat pattern a little bit weirder. So I threw a wah pedal on it and just started like messing around with a wah pedal on this hi-hat loop. And then you just like shift it around a bit and then lower it in the mix, pan it left to right, and it sounds kind of cool. So there's that. And then another thing that I've been obsessing about is I'm recently getting like one of those more portable Zoom recorders, like the ones with like XLR inputs and stuff like that. So what you can do with those is you can go to places locally that have like a really nice like room tone or a reverb, and you can just go around, hit record on those things, and you can just clap, and you can use that clap sample as an impulse response.
I was gonna say as an IR.
Yeah, and so you can just load that into a convolution reverb, and you can have that space as a reverb on a track that you're working on.
Yeah, that's pretty cool,
bro. That's that kind of nerdy shit I'm talking about, man. That's that kind of thing.
There's so much cool stuff. I literally like, I have to put a limit on how much time a day I can focus on stuff like that, because if I focus on it too long, I will just not get anything done. But
for sure,
getting into weird stuff, like, man, if I take with like impulse response stuff, if you like go in a big room and then you reverse that a bit and then load that reverse impulse response into a convolution reverb, you get this weird reverbed reverse effect thing that's super weird. And there's it's like you put in all of that work to do the sound design stuff, and then you can just like save it and categorize it on the side, so that whenever you're like, man, the track I'm working on right now, it needs a little bit of spice, you can grab this like spice rack that no one else has.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you just have one of those favorite sections set up as spice rack.
Legit, I do. It's called Spice Rack,
awesome.
And it's just full of a bunch of weird devices that, like, you know, it's not that I would never want to give them to people, but it's just like I can't give them to people. They're so messed up and mangled, and like it's this weird plugin with this weird plugin chained together in a weird way, and it makes this stupid weird reverb effect. And like, I could try to give this to you as a .adg, but I don't think you'll be able to open it.
Yeah. But also it'll help you make interesting, if you ever get into building your own sample packs libraries, it'll help you build some really interesting stuff later down the road for that. Okay, those are sick. I really like those. And what are some more interesting music that you've been listening to? Let's go something that you didn't work on. So something that you think is interesting and something that you think is slept on.
Ooh, something that is interesting and something that I think is slept on. I'm going to look up this guy just so I can look at. So I'm still very new to the hyper pop world, but
that's Josh's entire life.
You always say that, but it's not, okay? It's not.
Only half, right? It's only half your life.
No, I just really love Charlie
Mom and Dad, I wish you guys would just stop fighting. Just
you know what I've been listening to lately? I've been literally listening to folk music. All right? I don't want to hear it. I'm tired of this slander.
I mean,
but no, I mean, I'm pretty good at it. So
yeah.
But the new new Breakin' stuff is really cool.
Fantastic.
He's great.
Just because there's a bunch of like, I feel like with hyperpop, it's like there is like the cool like sort of meme distorted side that comes up, but I feel like with that new record, it's like super high quality. Like everything is super crisp, super clean, but it still has that like vibe that goes really hard, and you know you get like little bird wing flaps as like your main snare hit, but it's just really nice and crispy, and you know you get the emo sad boy vibes.
You know that he mixes and masters all of his music too?
I did not, but that's really impressive because it all sounds really nice and very cool.
Yeah, it's
all from his bedroom using an SM7B somewhere
and
in
a lot of
Ohio.
stock Ableton stuff.
That's
It's very frustrating.
Breakins shouldn't be an artist. He should definitely just be a producer and just produce for other people.
He's so wild.
He's definitely like an outlier. I don't know. Hyperpop right now kind of sucks. Like whenever it was the whole like PC music thing, it was really cool, and then it kind of just turned into like meme music, and like that kind of sucked. And I think like for the most part, like there's like you can either go more towards like the indie side, like Break-Ins, which turns out really, really cool, or you can go more towards like the PC music thing. And that would be really cool too, but like no one's really doing it. So like I work with this artist named Cavern, and we've been trying to like kind of blend the two, which has been so much fun. And so like Break-Ins has always talks about Haylog is another one. If you haven't heard of him, he's really, really, really good. And yeah, I really want to do like more of that stuff, because there's just so many cool artists that like barely even get listened to. Like Haylog has 90,000 monthly listeners, and he might be like one of the craziest artists I've ever heard.
Nice. And then
it's so sick.
I think, let's see, if I had to pick a song, something that I think is slept on, I think hardcore. It is the album "Making Mirrors" by Gautier. So
I never listened to it.
The dude who made Somebody That I Used to Know, and it's from that album, but that entire album is a very avant-garde pop record that is a love letter to like 60s psychedelic pop.
Yo,
and it's
Smoke and Mirrors, that song slaps. That song slaps so hard.
And it's like,
and Eyes Wide Open.
Dude, there's documentaries of how he made it. The dude literally grabbed a laptop with Ableton and made it in his parents' barn in Australia, like by himself. And
I need to watch that.
The whole, like, it's so weird. And he's like, I got this old weird cotillion style organ, and so I made this avant-garde song that's an alternate universe where people have cotillion organs instead of TVs, and like I'm gonna vocode my voice and only sing it monotone, but then pitch shift it down and then manually. It's like so much cool production stuff with a really interesting texture, and it really bums me out that like people only know it for like the one song that radio was willing to play.
So I listened to that whole record when it came out and was massively impressed and was really confused why people didn't listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing is just so like, and it has the like Easy Way Out vibe that's just like hard, like indie rock, almost like a Monkeys song or a Mute Math thing. And then it goes all the way to,
it's got
like Eyes Wide Open.
Yeah.
And there's like, there's just so many cool textures and stuff like that in that record that that was one where I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna buy this on vinyl just so like I can keep it and like assure that I'm never gonna lose it when the internet goes down.
Yeah, inevitably.
That's super, super cool. I didn't know that album was like that. I'm gonna have to check it out.
It slaps.
Yeah.
There was this artist that I wanted to talk about earlier when we were talking about like Spotify or something. I think I talked about her last episode that we did, but her name's Ethel Kane, and she makes like really cool like indie music, and she has like 1.6 million monthly listeners on Spotify right now. She's unsigned, and she dropped this album last year called Preacher's Daughter, and it starts out and I was like, oh, it's like a pretty like indie record. I love this so much, and it's a concept album. And so at one point it's like the part of the album where she's like getting murdered, and it's like a black metal song.
That's so sick.
It is probably like the craziest album I've listened to in a very, very, very long time. And I just love everything about it. I think it's so cool. I'm really excited about like indie music in general right now. You know, like you were just talking about Break-Ins, and it's like, yeah, he just did that all just in like his parents' bedroom, you know.
The barrier of entry to make something really cool and really profound is like really low, which is like, you know, people can complain about like all the junk on Spotify, but at some point, you know, I would rather, for people who draw stuff, I would rather have everybody be able to have like a pencil and paper than to say like, oh, you've got to prove that you can draw really well before you can get some.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure most of the Ethel Kane stuff, like she self-produced also. She just did it all in this house she was living in Alabama. And like, I don't know, it's just super cool. Like there's like a lot of really cool music that's coming out that's still like getting attention without like catering to algorithms or catering to, the For You page or whatever.
It's catering to people first. And it's like I think there was a thing with Andy Mineo where he talked about like there's the Flow Rida way of growing versus like the Fish way of growing, whereas like Flow Rida had like so many Grammys and so many accolades, but like few years later after his big success, there's no like diehard Flow Rida fans, and he's like having to do like corporate events to like keep his gigs up filled, versus bands like Fish who have literally never had like a Billboard charting thing ever, but they've made an album every single year since like the 80s, and they sell out Madison Square Garden every single time they play. Yeah. And it's like you kind of have to decide like where do you want things to be, and if you care more about people and like making really cool stuff, it's kind of been the arc of this whole conversation, but it's like, you kind of need to be willing to give up the chase for the algorithm or the accolades or whatever,
to focus on the people that you want to talk to.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful place to end. Seth, thank you so much for hanging out with. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I loved this conversation, man. It was so good. So much little stuff here and there. So many different like weaves and stuff. Why don't you give everybody plug away, my friend? Plug away yourself and where you want to send people.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I'm just on socials everywhere at The Velvet Year. It looks like you're spelling out the velvety ear, but it's not. It's The Velvet Year. I'm on Instagram, TikTok. If you want to see like a majority of the content stuff that I've done, that's probably going to be on YouTube, where, if you look up Velvet Year, you're only going to see me and like some K-pop band called Red Velvet. So it will be very easy to discern between the small Japanese Korean girls and the bald guy with a beard.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. If you could take the time to like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio platform, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed, and also leave a rating and a review. It helps the show get out to new people, and we're trying to grow every single week. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, and we'll see you next week.